Okay, hello again, everyone. So welcome to the Imagining Queer Bandung event. And today we're very honored to have the Imagining Queer Bandung team from Berlin, in fact, from different parts of the world, talking about their fantastic experience of filmmaking, film exhibition, and podcasting, and so on. So I am going to hand over the mic to Purple Fan, who is one of the organizers and who is going to introduce all the other speakers and lead the panel discussion. Purple, the mic is yours.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming to this event, and thanks Hongwei for inviting. And it's amazing that today the topic is called Another Queer World is Possible. I don't know what is another, and we are all others in this society, I guess. Most of us living in a country that we are supposedly not the majority. So it's really amazing to have this great lineup. But before everything starts, I have to say that I had bad experiences teams, and they really sucks. But thanks to British government, they have to force us to use Teams all the time. So if there is any technology problem comes, and don't blame us, blame on Microsoft. Briefly about me myself, and I'm a filmmaker from China, now based in Berlin. And a few years ago, more than 10 years ago, actually, together with my colleague in Beijing, we initiated Queer University, which is a project that is training in the beginning, training young activists and filmmakers, but later extending into exchange between filmmakers and young activists. And in 2017, my colleague Xiaogang Wei and other colleagues of mine brought also this project to African countries. Um, and beside film screening, also have a workshop together. And so in Berlin, and actually, I know both of my co-curators, Sarnt and Regil, for quite a few years. And last year, we met and discussed about the possibility to do activities in the frame of Queer Asia, and featuring about both these two very important identity to all of us. And we funded this program called Imagining Queer Bandung, not only on Asian queer identity, but more from a perspective of questioning about identity and extending about identity. Besides queer film screenings, and we also had this two wonderful workshop. And I firstly want to invite my colleague Sarnt to introduce about give us a brief background about the Berlin queer scene, and how from their perspective seeing why it is necessary to have this event. So Sarnt.
Hi, hello everyone. Yeah, I'm very glad to be here, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm San Uttamashot. I am also local filmmaker curator based in Berlin, and yeah, so I need to share my screen. Technology. Are you hearing? Are you seeing me sharing?
Yes, I can see
Oh,
the slides now.
okay, perfect. Um, so it's almost like we are talking to ourselves, but okay, let it be. Yeah, hi everyone. So basically, we operating in Berlin, and just a few sort of facts as a background to remind you. Germany has kind of also very distinctive history as a sort of quote unquote West European country. And maybe some of you remember that Germany used to have this anti-homosexual laws, paragraph 175, which was sort of like the huge thing that was a legacy even before the Nazi time, and then the Nazi time that it became the law. And the law was deleted or destroyed in 90s. It was not be destroyed like kind of before. So actually it took a long time until Germany get to the point even to recognize homosexuals as a legal bodies. But then it got complicated because of the split in, especially in Berlin, into east and the west, because of the Cold War policy, which also complicates a lot of things. Like for example, that and the space that we're operating in is called house that statistic. which is also the leftover of the socialist GDR buildings. So it means, you know, house of statistics. I guess back then people were making like statistics as a, you know, social policy, urban planning. And so in this building, it was not only that we are kind of appropriating this space to use some to do some cultural thing, but it was actually kind of to relieve this spirit of, you know, what East Berlin back then were trying to do, which kind of failed, is, you know, to achieve a certain kind of equality, quote unquote, in their own ideological term. But actually, it's, you know, even when we have film screenings or film workshop there, etc., it all reflect this spirit without knowing it, because we are exactly working inside their own space. And of course, all these things are face gentrification. And so, you know, since the kind of this the topic of equality came into question, then that it spins into this thing what some people call rainbow capitalism, which some of you have known already. And it became a very hard and difficult question to talk about, for example, queer colors, or talking about some certain struggle, for example, Palestinian struggles, or, you know, the intersection, or like even Romani struggles, because seems like in the kind of a white queer spaces, these topics are not to be raised. And so I think it really became very important to create a space specifically for queer colors, or, you know, other types of bodies, that we can actually have this critical conversation together. So that sort of became like the background for this project. Um, the place where we work for is called Bibak, and it's sort of they specialize in a post-migrant perspectives. It was founded by Malve Lipman and Jan Sungu, who worked for this space for a while, and usually they were somewhere else, and then now they found this cinema called Cinema Transtopia. I repeat again because it's a very weird name for some people, Cinema Transtopia. And it was exactly in this house of statistic where I told you. They have brought so many interesting film programs throughout the years, like decolonizing the screen from the Chati, which, you know, features so many discussions. The Angeladen, or like the invitees, which features the archive research on films on migration and migrants in Germany from the 70s, with the Domit, if some of you have known it. And Fiction Bescheinigung is also a part of Berlinale Forum this year, where they show like amazing films as a kind of retrospective on German people of color cinema. And then this is also Southeast Asian focused film screening that I'm having soon, Common Code. And so a part of our program took place, yeah, in June and July, Imagining Queer Bandung, which Rakil will give you some details about the whole curatorial background behind it. But I'm just saying that for now, logistics, we had a program in June, and then we had a little bit tour in Hamburg and in Munich too this last month. So it has been great. It's a kind of first time collaboration between we three, Rakil, Popo, and me. And I'm very happy that it happened. And in general, this program just have like film screening and film workshop and podcasting workshop, which I think Rakil will give you more information about that. But that's all for me. So now.
Okay, now we invite Regil to talk about the background of Imagining Queer Bandung and the team. How does this team was working and funded?
Thank you, Papa. Thank you, Hongwei, for organizing this event. Hi, everyone. My name is Raigel. I am one of the community organizing of Queer Asia Collective. It is a collective of queer academics, activists, and filmmakers in London and in Berlin. I am a master student at the University of Hamburg. Also, I'm a curator, and I'm one of the curators of the Imagining Queer Bandung. I'm going to share my slide talking about the curation behind the Imagining Queer Bandung, the theme itself, and what does Imagining Queer Bandung mean. But before I talk more into that, I will play a video about the Asia Africa conference that took place in Bandung in the 1955. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah.
This is the first intercontinental conference of colored peoples, so-called colored peoples, in the history of mankind.
Okay, so that's the Africa Asia conference that took place in Bandung, which is a city in West Java, Indonesia. And now I'm going to present. Okay, this is kind of complicated switching tab. Okay, so who are we and what is Imagining Queer Bandung? The idea of creating the work and this festival came about like a year ago, and it took us almost like that much of time to come up with this concept of like organizing a film festival and also organizing two workshop, which were the filmmaking workshop and the podcasting workshop. Imagining Queer Bandung, the theme itself came from our conversation that we had between me, Sarn, and Popo of wanting to create like an alternative space of knowledge making and knowledge transfer. Also, like how cinematography can be kind of like a form of like activism as well, and how like films also like a really crucial aspect of our work, or at least for like Popo and also Sarn. So coming from that sort of like inspiration from the conference, we wanted to create a space where the work of like people from the global south, specifically from, you know, like in my curation practice, I kind of employed this kind of approach of like amplifying the voices of people from Southeast Asia, which, you know, is often kind of like lost or kind of forgotten in a way. So we wanted to kind of like come together and like curate a festival where we showcase the work of people from the global south at our film festival. And during the film festival, we had like it run through like 8 days, and we had 8 sold out programs. We had 28 screenings. We had about 10 guest speakers and 3 performances at the opening and then for the closing, and also like 1 DJ set. And overall, I think we also had like over 300 attendees, and it was took place at Cinema Transopia, which Sarn had explained to you earlier. Uh, and beside that, we also had a free filmmaking and podcasting workshop for specifically for queer BIPOC people based in Berlin or like surrounding area. We wanted to create a space where this kind of like opportunity is not often afforded by us. So we had that sort of like, I had the word power, but like the power to kind of like present something, create something for our community, and like creating this kind of space for people to be together, and also like to take something and to learn something from each other as well. So all the workshop facilitators were all queer BIPOC cultural practitioner, filmmakers, and podcasters. I will talk about the podcasting workshop in a bit, I think. So right now, we're going to continue talking about the filmmaking workshop, which was led by Sarn and also Kit, I think. And I will pass the speaker to you.
Yeah, so as Regil had give you more general information about the background of film screenings and the workshop, and so Søren, who is the coordinator for our filmmaking workshop, and Kit is our major mentor for the workshop. Could you please share the process of selecting participant and also how you do decide the program? So welcome.
Yeah, sure. I think like so I think we had a open call for applications back in May-ish and received like almost 30 applications, and but also we actually made it very clear that, like, you know, the language of application is not the criteria. So basically we actually encouraged people to be frank, like, write shit, but you know, because language use should not be the criteria for, you know, it should not kind of say that you are more educated than others. Of course not. So basically, we received a lot of applications, and then we selected only 6 participants between me and Kit. Was very hard decision because I think everyone has a lot of potentials, and the criteria were rather like the possibility of making this short film within Berlin, within the budget, and also the potential of being able to work as a group and also to contribute some perspectives to others. So it was almost like a curating per se perspectives within this space. And so with this 6 participant film, we got like very diverse and very critical views. Like we got Dalit queer person, we got a Black Asian person, we got like a person from in exile who were also giving their opinions and experience about the workshop at the end of this talk. And I think ultimately we learned so much from them as much as they learn from us. So basically, there's no this hierarchy between like students or teachers, because we are actually on a similar equal level of living through the world, and just that we know a bit more about quote unquote professional background, and that's all we know. And but also kind of fuck up the structure of film school a bit. So when you go to film school, you have this kind of proper structure of what you have to learn to be able to be called filmmaker, and we just have like whatever, fuck you, let's just do it the way we want it. So it was a lot of technical teachings, but also a lot of gossips, and just let people be. And I love this way of, let's say, knowledge production, because ultimately there's no bigger structure or institution that standardize what we have to do. And maybe Kit can also expand on that. Hello, Kit.
Hello. Should I start?
Okay, open your camera.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Hold on. I think. Okay. Can everybody see me? And I'm going to share the screen right now. Is the screen sharing? Okay, great. I actually like what Sal talks about, that how we kind of try to fuck up the filmmaking, or like a film teaching film teaching system, because the workshop is basically about decentralizing the power. So to introduce myself, hello everyone. My name is Kit Hong, and thank you very much for having me in the panel. And I am a filmmaker. Actually, I come from this perfect, film education background. I am a lecturer in the film product. I'm a lecturer in film production from the Hong Kong Film Academy, and then I'm also a PhD student from Goldsmith University. So this is actually what you're seeing here. Actually, is a group photo taken in Cinema Transtopia after the 8 day of workshop. So I have been teaching this workshop in different places because of the invitation from Popo and Xiaogang, as from Queer University. That workshop, the similar workshop, was actually held before in Beijing, in Guangzhou in China, Zimbabwe, Ghana, and this time in Berlin. And in my PhD studies in London, I actually encounter a lot of very interesting literature that talks about queer feelings and queer hauntings that is actually suppressed, and but actually very valid for us to discuss, and very valid, and have the importance for us to foreground them, to talk about them. So I decided to help the participant in the workshop to foreground their feeling, to validate their personal experience in the queer world. And providing them with very basic techniques and knowledge in audiovisual language, so to help them to visualize their ideas. Those are little literature that I reference to. In the very first day, I first start to distinguish the idea between knowing, experiencing, and practicing. Everybody, when everybody hears something, they start to know something, but it's actually very different from how they experience that things. And when they continue and repeatedly practicing something, the experience actually evolve and change their their habit as well. And this is how I want to start the course. First, actually, I try to create a very safe space for them to share their personal experience. I use the singing bowl as an example. While we know the singing bowl can make sounds, I actually ask each of them to hit the singing bowl by themselves, to place them in different body parts, and to experience different type of sound quality, and also to experience how the sound intensity and sound vibration is created. This is how we, this is some of the photo that how they practice and experience singing bowl. We actually put the singing bowl on the head, so the echo and the sound creators is very directly go into our head. And we also put the singing bowl in different direction in the body. And then on day 2, we actually start to create a body drawing, which is an adaptation from a body imaging workshop from Barbara Hammer, where they can actually experience how the personal feelings can transform into drawing and abstract shape. I guide them through a very simple 10 to 15 minute meditations while they are lying on the big piece of paper. And then they are given a chance to present, and after they draw and visualize what they can see during this meditation, they are giving some time to present what they are trying to visualize in their body painting. This exercise actually successfully, in a way, help the participant to find out who they are, what is their bodily feelings about. And the next step is actually to explore where the feelings come from, and where and how this queer haunting is created. This is some of the example of the body painting. This is the presentation. Okay, some participants actually show us tattoo on their body, which they also draw in the body painting as well. After that, we invited actually different guests to share with the participant how different queer filmmakers produce their work. This includes curators from film festival. At the same time, they are also invited to repeatedly talk about their project, how they produce it. I want to emphasize this word repeatedly is because the repetition is the nature of practice. By repeatedly doing by repeatedly working on different various projects, they're actually also meditating their queer experience as well. So this is a picture of this tutor of us to tell us about the idea of soundscape using storyboard. And we also have Ego talks about to share about the experience in editing using different programs. And we also have a queer art director, Cloud, from Hong Kong to share his experience with us working in professional film set. And this is when we are teaching the participant various filmmaking technique using semi-professional camera as well. So now I would like to share some of my video material from the class. Can you all still hear me? Great. So so here is the materials. Sorry. Okay. So this is one video material. We actually have a participant interviewing a lot of people surrounding a skater park in Berlin, which is quite interesting.
Oh, there's no sound, sorry.
Is there no sound?
Yeah. Can you please reshare and press the include sound button?
Okay, hold on. Here we go. Reshare and include sound. No, it's not included, but let me actually just show you the picture and try to describe it, because the sound is not as important. Pardon me for the technology things. And then I'd like to share with you another video here. We actually spot in a common space where there is queer people doing skating as well. We was actually pretty amazed to see how the queer community of skater immersed into public as well. So after we spot this guy, we actually have a very good interview and chat with this people as well. So this is a short video that I would like to share with you. This one. So we actually he's actually a former drag performer from London, originally from Australia. He moved to the Berlin, actually enjoying the queer community a lot. So this is one of this is like a behind the scene footage from the participant. So like you see how this queer skater used the public space to become his own performing space as well. Here is the climax. This is how it catches our attentions. Not this one. There you go. So everybody was trying to take photos, and then we was very lucky to have like a very long interview with him. And actually, this is a project from NADA. Let me show you. Go back to the Pepsi. Okay, here we go. So actually, this is more photos on what we were doing on editing as well. So this is actually a project from NADA. NADA is identify themselves as a gender non-boundaries. She is Thai, growing up in Switzerland, living in Hamburg during this time. She bring a project to us wanting to talk about the exclusivity of a white queer skater community in Hamburg. But when she was researching and interviewing people in Berlin, she actually found out the situation in Berlin is very, very different from Hamburg. But since she cannot travel back and forth between Berlin and Hamburg, she has slightly adjusted her project point of views in our workshop. So Berlin basically open up her their mind as well, compared to their experience in Hamburg. We also have another Vietnamese German participant who also find out Vietnamese poem written by their mother in social media. While this poem is not directly addressed to anyone, they actually have a direct feelings and connection to this poem because the poem directly addressed a mother and daughter relationship. The safe space we created in our workshop become a space that they can revisit and talk about their feelings. But at one point, this participant feel that poem will be too much for themselves. So they tell us that they may need more time to digest, to work on to further work on the video. So this actually become the challenge and limitation of our workshop, because as these participants, this workshop is very much participant oriented and queer experience oriented. And you can actually see from these two examples, we have so many diverse experience from different parts of Germany. So and a lot of them actually is hooked with their family of origin. So the challenges in this workshop is how do we tailor-make a method and how do we find a way to validate their feelings as well. But then this diversified experience from each participant actually are very, very eye-opening for us. And it is actually very important for us to know their feelings and to validate and to tell them that the queer feeling is actually very, very relevant to the queer community worldwide. The introduction of the film production technique become the skills to help them actually to polish their storytelling techniques and to sharpen and foreground their voice, to enable and share the experience in the film and video platform, which is the very common platform like YouTube, Vimeo, and also in other film festival platform as well. So I think the way to live an alternative queer world is actually constantly practice queer storytelling. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Kit, for sharing not only on the filmmaking workshop, but also personal view on queer hunting, and very impressive. And by the way, later we're going to have one of our participants of the filmmaking workshop to share the experiments of during the 8 days for a weekend. But before that, we're going to have a review to introduce about what happened at the podcasting workshop.
Yeah, thank you, Pablo. I was the coordinator of the podcasting workshop. Let me see if I can share my screen again. Yeah, the workshop was designed to provide participants with the knowledge of practical skills and tool to produce their own podcast. The podcast was very much like one-on-one basic podcast, and it was challenging in so many ways for me as a non-podcaster. I am someone who likes and consumes a lot of podcasts, and I thought, to kind of like give an alternative to like a knowledge transfer and like knowledge making outside of academia, because I'm also like in graduate school right now, like constantly thinking about like how to make my work more accessible. And this idea of like making coordinating a podcasting workshop came from that, like my own personal experience of like actually learning from podcast episode that I used to listen going to university, and like how much of that contributed to like my work as an academic, also like in graduate school, constantly thinking, constantly reading, and also listening, and also like watching theory. um, and the podcasting workshop was led by 6 different facilitators from various backgrounds, interdisciplines, coming together to share their knowledge. Similar to the filmmaking workshop, there was no like hierarchy in that as well. The most challenging part of me was to like structure the content of the workshop. As a non-podcaster, I had to ask so many questions to the facilitators, and I had to also like organize a meeting how we can sort of like create a format and content that would benefit the participants. And it worked out well at the end, although with all the challenges and like with me not knowing so much about like podcasting in terms of like production, and also like what needs to be done behind the scene. That was like one thing that I was worried about. But thankfully, Rodrigo, like this person was such an angel, guiding me through like the process as well. So a lot of like my work, and also like the Imagining Queer Bandung is very much like collaborative curatorial practice, and my work specifically is also like center surrounding like this kind of topic of like community based, and also like curatorial collaborative practice as well. Going back to the podcasting workshop, the workshop cover very basic stuff and skill like audio storytelling basics, including concept, format, structure, the art of interview, and how to prepare and conduct various interview types, sound mixing, editing, distribution, and project sustainability. These are some of the pictures from the podcasting workshop. It was done in two consecutive weekends, so that we had a bit of time for the participant to produce their own podcast. What was beautiful about the whole workshop process was that it did not go exactly how I planned it. But what was beautiful about that, a lot of like meaningful friendship and connection were formed at the workshop by like sharing and exchanging information among participants themselves. So that was like exactly how the festival envisioned, like Imagining Queer Bandung itself to be like. And I'm so happy that one of the participants and students, Henry, this person will be, they are here actually, and they will talk about their podcast and also like their experience being part of the podcasting workshop. And yeah, I think that's the end of the little bit of like the podcasting workshop. And I will give the mic back to Popo.
Okay, thanks very much, Regil, for sharing to us. And I want to say all those information are overwhelming and getting more and more interesting. So by the way, we have the time for Q&A, so our audience, please get ready for your question. And but before that, we are going to invite Ahmed from the filmmaking workshop to share about the experiments.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you, and thank you for the invitation. I was a participant in the filmmaking workshop, and I want to share some of my reflection and experiences. I will go back a little bit to before the workshop and share a bit about my journey. And I feel that the point that Kit made about queer storytelling is my starting point. So I don't have access to moderate my slides, so I will need help from Hangui to.
Sure. So I am sharing the slides now. Can anyone tell me whether the slide is showing your screen?
Yes, it's showing.
Okay, brilliant. So you can start now. So when you want me to change to the next slide, just to say next slide.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Okay, next. Just a little bit about my background. So I come from Egypt, and I come from a health background. And I was working a lot in sexual health projects in Egypt. And at some point, I felt that I want to transfer the knowledge that I was having and creating and transferring within the communities that I work with to the online sphere. So I started to blog, and blogging in Egypt was a very important tool of resistance because we didn't have independent media until 2005. And around that time, there was a lot of blogs trying to kind of highlight social issues and political issues that were not discussed in the media. So I try to bring stories around sexuality and gender to the online sphere. Next. At the same time, there were also media that were trying to tell stories about queer life in Egypt, but this media were international media. As you can see on those slides, there are stuff from Reuters, New York Times, especially after the revolution in Egypt in 2011, there was a lot of interest to cover those kind of stories. At the same time, we felt as a queer community in Egypt that there is a lot of problems with this reporting. There was a lot of issues involved. Sometimes the journalists didn't follow media ethics. Sometimes they outed people, mentioned names that they were not supposed to be mentioned places of the queer community that are supposed to remain secret. At the same time, we felt that we needed sometimes to collaborate with them, to work with them, so that the story that is being told still reflects our reality. So that was a big challenge for the community, how to deal with this storytelling. And that's why the title of this slide is if modern journalism somehow can be equated to anthropology, in the sense that it's a science that tries to kind of research the natives of the third world and produce knowledge that doesn't necessarily improve the lives of those people, but exploits those stories to prove certain points about who is the Western world and who is the other world. Next slide, please. So in that sense, also, I just want to say on the point of visibility, especially that I come from a place like Egypt, that visibility has been a double-edged sword. In this slide, you can see how media fetishizes queer stories, but also sometimes exploits the queer stories to create success and fame. In this case, for example, in Egypt in 2014, a media person caused a raid on a bathhouse in Egypt. So there was a lot of the dynamic where media people in Egypt exploit queer stories just to create a media, kind of like a moral panic at the expense of the safety of queer people. Next slide. So yeah, I think what is also important for me is to talk, since we are talking about queer Bandung and this kind of like third world perspectives, this event was very important for me, and it has inspired so many people around the world. Now nobody really knows what is going on in Egypt and what happened after that. But I think what is also important is that this kind of big events are also covered in Western media in a certain way, which also obliterates other narratives of the people going through this kind of event. So if we in Egypt say that the revolution has failed, for us it is clear that it's about the counter-revolution and the local politicians that failed the revolution, but it's also about how Europe and the US and the Western powers also collaborated with the dictators that crushed the revolution. Next slide, please. So moving on from Egypt to Germany, and in 2014, I had to escape Egypt because of my political engagement and moved to Germany. And I was really shocked to see how those kind of dynamics with media and storytelling were also repeating themselves. So the refugee crisis of 2015, maybe you still remember, the description itself as a crisis, and how it was reported that Germany has accepted and welcomed so many people. That of course is an important narrative, because other countries in Europe were not accepting refugees as much as Germany. At the same time, this narrative kind of also dilutes the crisis of that refugees themselves were going through, and that this crisis actually is a crisis of the border system that Europe creates to not allow people to come to Europe. So I will just share a little story. When I was doing a German class in Germany, in Berlin, when I arrived here. And I remember in that class, there was a man who was sitting there, and I didn't know what he was doing. And then I realized that this man is a journalist who is basically writing a story about the integration of refugees. And nobody asked us if this person was should be there or not. And this person then came to try to interview me. And especially when he found out that I was living with a person, a German person with a Jewish background, they really wanted to just come to my place and shoot the story. So I'm just sharing that story as kind of like an example of those kind of dynamics of storytelling and media that kind of don't really respect the ethics of what stories actually are told. Next, please. And this is also other examples of how the German media was talking about refugees. You can even see from the images how those kind of like shadows and those kind of hidden people are talked about, but they don't get this chance to kind of speak and tell their stories themselves. So next, please. And I'm sharing these two here, kind of a meme, because I think also sometimes we need a meme, some kind of comic relief, to also kind of like make the point about who gets to share their stories and what happens when people share their stories through other media, and then their narratives gets twisted in the process. And I also have a story about this slide, since I remember actually not very long ago, there was an academic conference organized on queer refugees. And all the speakers, all the panelists in the conference didn't have refugee background. And the only refugee person that was invited was invited there to make a dance performance, which I respect that a dance performance can be a sort of self-expression. But however, it just repeats the dynamic of queer refugees not being able to speak for themselves. So yeah, this brings me to the point of being a participant in the workshop. So I made the application, and I was so glad and lucky to be accepted in this space, because all this kind of context that I was sharing brings me to the point of like how queer refugee stories are told. The problem with, or like the patterns that I see in how queer refugee stories are told, is that they enforce this binary between our countries, the region we come from, as backward, homophobic, and violent, and the Western world as progressive, liberal, and enlightened. And that that kind of narrative, as Sarnt in the beginning and other people were talking about, how queer of color experiences, especially in places like Berlin, are kind of like minimized. And we don't have also access to institutions that support our kind of our art and creativity. So for me, being in a space like the workshop was a chance for me to kind of tell my story, to practice and learn how to actually create new tools to tell my story, but also to connect with other queers of color from other places in the world where these connections were not possible before. So I think this is really the power of being in a space like this, and being able to tell the story of a queer refugee. The film project that I was working on during the workshop, and I'm still working on, is called Queer Exile. And just to finish my talk, I can invite you to just watch a few seconds of the piece. When people ask me how I like Berlin as a way to start the conversation, I worry that if I said how I really feel, they would tell me to go somewhere else, or even worse, to go back to where I come from. I always think about return.
Hallo. Ich mache nur ein Foto von die Abstimmung, also das ist so abgegangen. Okay, was ist hier? Also ein Fußballsong. Sorry, also das machen wir jetzt nicht mehr, ja? Okay, ja.
Okay, so is that the end of the slide?
Thank you for your technical assistance.
Thank you. I'm terrible.
Oh no, Hongwei, you're wonderful. You're wonderful. You know, you're expert of team. So we're so lucky to have you here. And thanks, Ahmed, for sharing. And this topic is very important on queer excel when you are you face such a big challenge, political challenge in Egypt, and then also exoticized by media in Europe. And this is something that we share a lot among different communities in Germany, in Berlin. And next, we're going to invite Henry to talk about their experiments in the podcasting workshop, and which is also and Henry's podcast also addresses very important marginalized community. And so please.
Hi, yeah, so as Popo said, my name is Henry. I use they, them pronouns. I've been a cultural organizer in one way or another for close to a decade in both Vancouver and London. I currently live in Berlin. About a month ago, I officially launched my podcast called In Our Bodies. It is currently a podcast where I speak to other people of color who identify as disabled, having chronic illness, or who are neurodivergent. But really, labels aside, for me, if you ever have felt like not up to snuff in your body or in your mind, I'm trying to build a podcast where it's a space that celebrates that. I truly would not have been able to make this podcast without the support and resources provided by the workshop. Before I get into my experiences with the podcast workshop, I want to speak a little bit about myself and how I decided to make a podcast in the first place. I'm queer and I'm ethnically Chinese. I've been chronically ill and struggling with my mental health for a long time, and really have been doing this without any tangible vocabulary or support for what I was going through. This is especially true with my chronic illness. As it is the story for many, I've had a lot of traumatic things and gaslighting happening to me from the medical complex, but also from friends and family because I've been sick most of my life. It really wasn't until I was hitting my mid-20s before I learned anything about disability advocacy, support, culture from the disabled community. It really changed how I saw myself for the better and really how I saw people in general. I even ended up writing my master's thesis at Goldsmiths in London on the connections between capitalism and disability. I was exposed to the disabled community by my white peers while I was studying in London. And while I will always be grateful to those friends, I quickly realized that there was a gap between the experiences I was seeing my white disabled peers have versus what I was going through in my life as someone who is digesting the realities of disability as a person of color. In short, the disability community is still very white. And that's a problem because without the acknowledgement of disability for people of color, especially for Black and Indigenous folk, a lot of POCs who are disabled don't get the accommodation that they need, or when they get diagnosed, they get treated in a way that often ends up getting them abused or locked up in prison. Not ideal. It really feels weird, seemingly having gained a new way of finding empathy for myself, but also feeling really lonely in it at the same time. I felt a tangible way for me to selfishly cultivate some community for myself, but also hopefully help other people of color who find themselves in the same spot was to make a podcast where me and other people of color could talk about disability or just talk about anything around the relationships that we have with our body and our mind navigating this world at large. This is a true story. The very day I decided to make a podcast, I opened up Facebook, and one of the first posts I saw was a call out to sign up for this workshop. And I applied, and thank God I got in. Very awesome. So, the workshop. It was firstly such a breath of fresh air to be able to do this in person. As somewhat of an introvert, I definitely forgot how necessary it was to have social spaces like this during the lockdown. Moreover, when preparing for this presentation, I also realized how vital it was to share resources and get to talk about cool skills like podcast making amongst other people of color and other queers. I feel like all my life, I've almost only had white people as educators and figures of knowledge of authority, mostly feeling the manufactured scarcity and or competition amongst my queer and POC peers to snag the limited spots in art circles, academic spaces, job interviews, you name it. I'm sure we can all relate. It really feels amazing to be able to do some thoughtful knowledge sharing in this space and not to feel alienated or in competition with one another under the straight white gaze for once. It took me reflecting upon this workshop to really understand how rare this was. So seriously, thanks and hats off to Regil and the rest of the team for the thought that they put into what we ended up learning in these 2 weekends. We touched on, as Regil said before, we touched on basic podcast structures, interview techniques, sourcing material, but they were very, very detailed. And we even learned stuff about being mindful about like legalities of learning, of legalities of like using music or using the photos or materials from guests. They really thought about everything. Really, so much more than that was shared in the mere 2 weekends. I'm just right now going to talk about what was memorable and helpful for me, not just from the people who were running the workshops, but from those who were attending as well. One of the most memorable, kind of funny and helpful things that were taught to us in the first weekend by one of the facilitators, Abby Bahiranthan, was these vocal exercises that they shared. These were warm-ups to make sure that we spoke clearly and articulated our words properly during the podcast. I still bite down on a cork or a big felt pen to practice my intros or right before an interview, and I really do think that I sound better for it. There's a lot that I didn't know. I don't have very much experience or really any experience at all in the podcast world. I'm really grateful that we got to do a basic rundown of audio editing. I later also got extra help from one of the other participants, Ashley, for editing the music in my podcast. I know that a lot of people say that, oh, there's so many resources online, everybody can learn anything just by themselves, but not everybody finds it really that easy to be learning stuff online without the assistance of other people or other community members there to kind of like assist or ask questions. I'm definitely one of those people. And I feel like if I were to have tried to make this podcast without the audio training alone from the workshop, I might have found it too overwhelming to even start. I really like that beyond the technical skills and basics to podcast building taught, they also brought in, Regil mentioned them before, Rodrigo Zorzanelli. For Rodrigo's part of the workshop, we did writing exercise that help us hone the skill in pushing our creative imagination, focusing on what it really was that we were trying to make in our artistic practice, but obviously specifically for this podcast project. Having a space to do that amongst our peers and hearing how everybody writes, thinks, creates is again something that is probably not even just rare for me. I don't think that I've ever been able to do that with other people, let alone other queer people of color. And at this point, it brings me to wanting to talk about how amazing it was being around the other participants in the workshop as well. It was really very fulfilling and very helpful. I really learned a lot from how other people decided to format their podcasts, what segments that they decided to include and create. My podcast is currently just people chatting, but it is definitely because of watching how other people were putting together their podcasts over the 2 weekends that it's helping me start to already think about how I can continue to build what it is that I'm trying to make for my podcast. There was also just a lot of knowing and trust that I felt from those running the podcast and the participants. I felt really held and able to share my ideas, and I got a lot of feedback as we were doing the work. Lastly, I wanted to talk about Dorhi Lamo's part of the workshop, where they talked about the possibilities to market and monetize for our podcast. I thought this was really important because I currently don't expect to be making any money off this project. And yes, fuck our generation for having to monetize all of our hobbies, but it's nevertheless still really good knowledge to have. A lot of us don't even know where to begin to find people to support our work. Dorhi's part of the workshop really pulled the curtain back a bit on the mechanics of how sponsorship and funding could work in this podcast world. Making money or having financial support can really make or break for the longevity, can make or break the longevity of a project, right? So yeah, those were the bits that I found really amazing in the podcast workshop. And this was my experience. I think the main takeaway I would want to reiterate is that it's really just vital to continue to create spaces where we as queer humans and as people of color get to share knowledge and support each other in the things we make and help each other fill in the gaps. I really did not know how much I was missing that in my life until I got to experience it. I want to end with a little clip from my podcast. This is the most recent episode. This is me talking to musician, pole dancer extraordinaire. Their name is George Lubon. And we're talking about disability and queerness in this little clip. So Hong Kwang-wei, if you could play the clip, that would be amazing. But because one of the questions I wanted to ask is if you feel like there's any link between disability and queerness as well, you know?
So I have been thinking about this, and I think, yes, in the way that both disability and queerness force you to think very consciously about self in a way that non-queer and non-disabled people don't have to. So like just thinking about your gender means a lot of things. It means like picking apart what body means versus what identity means versus what mood means. And I think those same skills you use with a lot of, at least with my disabilities, this sort of whole body versus identity versus mood is so smushed. That's not a word, but
it is now.
Yes, it is. So I think I think a lot of people who are queer are also disabled, but perhaps because of the way disability forces you to think, you're more likely to realize you're queer or accept that you're queer, and also vice versa, because not all disabled people seek diagnoses or ever accept that they are disabled or identify with that word. And sometimes when you're already other, it's easier to see the other.
The other. Yeah, that's the clip.
Okay, thanks very much, Henry. And one thing I want to ask Hong, is this possible to allow everybody through messaging to the chatting box? Because now I see it doesn't function if you're not a manager. Because soon we're about to open the question Q&A time, and I don't know if everybody is comfortable to turn on the camera. But of course, if you have a question, I really encourage you to turn on your camera and speak in the to us and about your question. But also maybe we figure out a way to share Henry's, for example, Henry's podcast. If there is a link and we can put into the chatting box, or we figure out a way way to share to the participant today. But before that, I also have some. I would love to have a few minutes to share my thoughts and also maybe everybody can give a little bit more about further information, updated information, and the conclusion. And after listening to the presentation of all of you, I feel now, especially after pandemic, it's so important to have this physical space, no matter space to watch films or do workshop and get to know each other together, which I can emphasize, have a lot of emphasis that the reason why I go to film school, which making documentary was because I was so introvert when I was in university. I was very shy. Was a student in film school, sitting in the back row, and even too nervous to raise any questions. But after I got this camera, this really gave me opportunity. I said camera is my teacher and also my doctor. Actually healed a lot of issues I had to deal with me about my identity. And secondly, I feel being together with because I was lucky enough to have been to most of the days of the two workshop. For the filmmaking workshop, I also give one lecture, and also went to listen to many of the other lectures. And during the podcasting workshop, I also went there to take photos. And then one thing, beside the professional side, and I remember every time we have a lunch break, we enjoy so much eating together and delicious food, and mostly ordering from non-white service, and enjoying Asian food or other cuisines, and also chatting with each other was so precious, and it brought definitely very important for us to sitting together and talking about profession or non-professional or gossip, and it was a lot of fun. And secondly, I want to share that after our workshop in Berlin and screenings in Berlin, we're also lucky enough with the help of other festival and also our co-curator. We were lucky enough to travel to Munich and Hamburg and to share our Imagining Queer Bandung program and guest curating program with them, and also hosting and participating panel. I found it was also very fascinating process, and I realized even though it's still long progress to really have those festival diversified, but at least from this two trip, I feel very touched that we have these allies, and they have awareness that the society of Germany need to be improved and need to be more different voice need to be seen, need more diverse of film need to be watched. So therefore, I would also invite maybe any of you have stuff to share on this topic about what could happen to the future, or what is happening now, or if you have any updates. Regil, maybe you can share your experiments with Hamburg Queer Film Festival, and how was our tour in Hamburg? How does that mean to you?
Yeah. Like before I talk about that, I just also wanted to say like a few things about the Imagining Queer Bandung in general, after like hearing Henry talk about their project and finally like release that project into the wild, because we never had that conversation after the workshop ended, because like we were running around doing like other festival. So it's really I don't know, finally like we are harvesting what we planted, and it feels good to hear something amazing came out of like the podcasting workshop. I think like Henry's project is one of the few that is already out right now, and I'm so happy, and I'm so like all for the moon right now to hear this incredible work born out of our festival. The Hamburg Queer Film Festival was also like incredible, like magnificent in so many ways. Just kind of like because I moved to Hamburg 3 years ago, and that's how like all this thing and started off. And it was good to be back in this place where it all started. And Hamburg is very much like middle class white society, so it is kind of like challenging to create this kind of space and to kind of like be feasible in this kind of way. So to be able to like show and like bring our festival to this kind of city really gave me the affirmation of like wanting to create something more and producing something to like create space for people like me who often feel like invisible in the art and also like in academia. So we actually had to fight for our space to be there as well. So that was like really good to kind of like be in that space and like be the center, like be the main character if you want, if you will. So also I want to thank Sarn, Bibak, and Popo as well for co-organizing everything together and gave me the language, open up so many doors, specifically Queer Asia, London, Danny and Jenny for letting me be part of the platform. It has been an incredible journey to be able to curate this kind of stuff alongside people that I admire, people that I love, people from the community, and it has been like empowering in so many ways. I wouldn't be where I am today without this, collective effort, collective work, collective project. Maybe that sounds cringe to some people, but like that's really vital in my practice as well. And how this kind of like people influence the way how I think. This kind of like festival and like people that I engage with in the workshop, like Ahmed, like Henry, and everyone else also like gave me like new perspective in life and like how I shape myself as an individual and like what does like my work mean for the community in general. So this has been like an incredible journey of like 1 year of curating and making this incredible collaboration happen. And we wouldn't be able to do all of this without everyone who is on this panel right now. So I just want to thank San Popo, Henry, Ahmed, also Hongwei for organizing this. Also, Kit for leading the filmmaking workshop as well. And that is like what we meant by like envisioning and also like reimagining what Imagining Queer Bandung, what that conference like was about, but like in the queer context and like how we can use that spirit to reimagine a world where like queer, brown and black bodies can come together and collectively think about our identities and ourselves, not always like about our struggle, but also like our power in the society, specifically in a place where it is majority predominantly white society, navigating ourselves as cultural practitioners.
Sorry.
I mean, thanks also for this, and I want to add that I have been having a short conversation with Kit also about the importance of creating infrastructure. Like basically, I have the feeling that a lot of projects, like amazing project, is usually sort of like a one punch or like one orgasm that you come and then, but like it doesn't repeat. And actually, I've been thinking a lot about how should we collect our effort to create a proper infrastructure. That means money, that means space where Queer Colors actually can have like ongoing things, so it can go from easy logistic. Like if you want a studio, there should be a studio that you can rent for free or little money. And we should, let's say, try to move forward this way. So our projects or initiative would not be just like one time per year, but like something that stays for longer term. But that would be the future goal of, if any one of you are interested, let's just talk and brainstorm about it. Yeah.
Okay, so now this chatting box still doesn't function. I guess if anyone has question, you will have to raise your hand, and then we will just turn on your camera and microphone to speak now. Do we already have any question?
No, I can't see any questions in the chatting box. I apologize. I've tried to add everyone to the kind of host, but I can't do it technologically, so I'm pretty hopeless. So while people are thinking about their questions, please do raise your hand, or please do just turn on your camera and mic and ask questions. So can I ask a few questions, or one question at least? So,
Yes.
so the question is that, so obviously we are from different cultural backgrounds and so on. So the world that we're living in actually is not a peaceful world. So where there are a lot of regional and political and economic conflicts between countries and regions. Even in Asia, I mean, there are different conflicts and clashes. So how does this international relation or geopolitics affect or may not affect your collaboration? In your collaboration, have you encountered any difficulties, cultural differences, and how do you resolve them?
Maybe let me answer first. I think especially what I experienced after moving back to Hong Kong is like the quarantine regulations is definitely limiting people from traveling. One can actually, I can actually go out, like, to teach another workshop again, but I'll have to count when I return to Hong Kong, a 21-day quarantine in a designated hotel that I have to pay for myself. So this make actually like the whole COVID policy that is different from different country is limiting me from teaching or sharing experience. Especially the whole workshop is it's very much about experiencing, and it's a lot about really getting together. So yeah, this is the main problem I am facing right now. If I'm living in a country that have very tight COVID policy.
I think for me it's interesting that right before I joined this event, I was interviewed 2 Indian artists. We had a conversation and also talking about solidarity between different regions. Especially we are sort of neighbors in Asia, but somehow I literally heard white people were telling me. So once I was saying goodbye to a friend, and I was like, I'm going to meet a Filipino artist friend of mine later, and then that person was like, oh wow, he was halfly joking. And I was like, I never heard Chinese people has Filipino friends, and aren't you guys enemies? And even if it's joke, it's also almost traumatized. And so what? At that time, there was some conflict between the 2 governments on some island in Pacific Ocean, but it was I was. But it also fascinating how the society portrait about how they assume because you two government have a conflict with each other, and then how you can't make a friend with each other. And then we also talk about the border conflict between China and India, and how come they would project this to us, two people living in Germany, one from China, one from India. But this is how I feel. This is so beautiful that we meet here in Berlin, and we get to know each other, become friends, and become collaborator. And no matter how much I say, every time people tell me, "Oh, Berlin is so diverse," and also so much so tolerant, so acceptable for. But sometimes I just roll my eyes. But I have to say, this city at least give us the opportunity, and also even with government funding and public funding, to create those workshop and create those space. No matter it's a short organism or it's a long-term relationship, and it was for me, and I appreciate those opportunity.
Yeah, navigating conflicts in this kind of context, not necessarily like a conflict. I think during one of the screening, we had a program for transgender topics at the film festival, and I happened to be the curator of that program. As a non-trans person, it was really difficult for me to sort of like speak on their behalf of them. So like I did not want to do and reproduce that kind of like discourse. So I was kind of baffled to kind of like see like what I can do, like how we can create this space and like make this space available for the people who actually have the lived experience as like trans body as well. Again, it's coming back to like friendship and also like our community work and being able to be close proximate with people who identify as like trans bodies around that. So we invited those people to talk about their personal experience as filmmakers. We had Zoya from the Trans Film Festival Berlin, and also we were in conversation with Blue Elliott, who is also like a non-binary trans Black filmmaker from Berlin as well, talking about their experience running a festivals, also like being filmmakers, talking about their own work in that context as well. So like, yeah, I must admit that like being like curating that program as a non trans person was in so many ways difficult for me, because again, you know, like that's what you hear often is like people talking on behalf of you about like their, you know, like your identity, because that's was also like my experience in Indonesia, working with so many like what academics from like Ivy Leagues, for example, talking about like stuff, decolonizing knowledge production, and also like queer topics in Indonesian context as well. So like coming from that understanding, we understood like how we did not want to produce any of those pattern as well. And we were happy, like, you know, as much Berlin is also like not exactly, it's not like the place that it sells, it's not like us, it's not the safe space that a lot of people talk about in so many ways, but also I think it provides this kind of like opportunity, and for some people it is special in their own ways. Like it depends on like how you interpret your personal experience, but I wouldn't sell it as like this queer mecca, if you want to call it that. But again, you know, I think they're compared to like, well, like places like Hamburg, it's I think we are afforded with that kind of opportunity, being like close to like a physical proximity with people, and explore this kind of like topics together, and also like the power of like listening as well. And I think that was also like important for me in the podcasting workshop, to also like let the people facilitator decide for themselves instead of me like telling them what to do and conceptualize everything all together. Hongwei, do we have any questions from the audience?
Well, not that I can see from the chat. So please, audience, please ask questions. So I'll finish off with the last question. So if we don't see any more questions or don't see any people raising their hand or turning on their mic, then I'll ask my final question.
But before that, I was sorry. Maybe you can. I don't know if anyone in Berlin, oh, of course, we are mostly based in Berlin, but CERN had this untitled film festival and happening, and maybe you can do a little bit advertisement about it. And especially there is also, I see this Friday there's gonna be a free screenings of workshop result from their workshop, and if it could be someone very interesting for some of the participants, or if you can introduce about it.
Yeah, I mean, I will make it very short. Basically, it's a new program with focus on Southeast Asian mainland, so Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And we show film from that region, but also from people in diaspora. So actually, a lot of them also born in Germany. So we show also film from them too. And if this Friday, we're gonna show another workshop that I did, filmmaking workshop last year. So it was during the lockdown, literally, with these communities, sort of people of colors community. It was sort of like not queer centric per se, but we have a lot of queer participants also. But it was basically on a similar workshop to this one with the Queer Bandung that we did. And basically it is the first time that we will see the results, like kind of finished the film from the workshop of last year. And I'm very excited to see, if any of you are in Berlin, just, I don't know, come to Cinema Transtopia on Friday to see something amazing. But yeah.
Yeah, and there are more screenings from this Thursday opening, November 11th until December 4th, and so you should come because the program is great if you're in Berlin, or if you have friends in Berlin. remember to send them, to tell them just search on title or Cinema Transtopia book, and then you will see you will find the link to the festival. And Hongwei, what is your last question?
No, the last part 2 question. Another advertisement, which is, I know that Beijing Queer Film Festival is going on at the moment, and you are one of the festival directors. So could you talk about the 20th anniversary of the festival? So what's happening this year? What's new? What's exciting?
Okay, this year is really important because it's our 20 years anniversary, and but obviously I will not starting with the first year. But it was founded in 2001, so it was a miracle. Every day, every edition of this festival, I think it was a miracle that we still exist, and another every day is a miracle. But this year we have some special section, including memory of some filmmakers who had passed away. We have a retrospective of Barbara Hammer and also Taiwanese filmmaker Mickey Chang. And both of them had come to our festival in Beijing before. We are also screening 2 films by Kid Hong and Stoma and Forever 17. Both of them had some memory to share with people who passed away. And so it was just a bit special. And we also had some retrospective of the classic queer films. We screen Paris is Burning and also Saving Face, which is classic Chinese American lesbian family drama. We incorporated with the Goethe Institute. We're presenting 2 German films. One is Neue Bau, talking about the trans man story, and the other one is Generation by lesbian and queer filmmaker pioneer Monica Choit. And so this I would really love to encourage you to go and watch. And by our opening film is 日子 the Days by Taiwanese iconic Taiwanese Malaysia filmmaker Cai Mingliang. So really proud to include them. Right now, the situation in Beijing is still not that clear. Can we have the festival until the end? Despite the political environment and also COVID situation, but we hope all the screening will go well. And on this Sunday, I'm remotely moderating a panel about diaspora in creation and creativity in diaspora, talking about the overseas Chinese queer filmmaking. And Kate will also be there as one of our panelists. Unfortunately, it's not live streaming, but if you have Beijing friends in Beijing, tell them to look up the event on the website of Goethe Institute. So that's it.
Great. That sounds exciting. So do we have more questions, or do participants, do panelists have questions for each other? So I see no questions. Then my last question is, what is your future plan? What is your future personal development or career plan? Or how are you going to take from here, from the Queer Bandung event? So if you have started making a podcast or making a film, and do you have any plans to continue to screen it and so on? So can I start from Harry?
I'm just trying to think. I have plans just to continue making these episodes, but I also am trying to brainstorm as to how to continue to develop the formatting of this. And to just, I don't know, create interesting content that is beyond just like long form conversations. Those are my future plans with the podcast, just continuing to develop and see what is the most interesting way to be like delivering information and conversations and like profiles of people of color who are disabled, neurodivergent, and chronically ill.
Brilliant. Can you remind us of your podcast channel or your podcast?
Yeah, so you can find it on Instagram and you'll find the links on there. It's called In Our Bodies. So INOURBODIES. Actually, something I was suggesting is maybe, would it be useful if we all kind of like sent an email list of like all of the things that like all of the events that we talked about?
Yes.
Like
yes.
later on, it might be useful to send that out to the guests, because yeah, I there's some things I want to check out as well, but I didn't catch all of the names.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to send you an email and collect all the information, and
Yeah.
or I'm going to share all this information with the registered participants. So
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ahmed, can I invite you to say next?
Yeah, I mean, my plan is to create more stories, to tell more, to do more queer storytelling, in different forms. I mean, I'm a writer, so that's usually the form that I work with, and thanks to the workshop, I learned a new language for queer storytelling. It's an exciting process always to learn a new language, and it makes you kind of like think in new ways. So in this kind of like post-production phase of creating a film, I'm still like doing a lot of reflection. What is my language? What is the way that I express myself? But also what kind of like collaborations that can come out of this, and especially when we work with video or film, it's very different from writing, because writing can be a very solitary kind of activity. But with filmmaking, you need to work with other people, and then in that process, then there is like this very exciting kind of sharing creativity and learning from other people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to work further in this project and all this kind of collaborative creativity process that will come out of it. For now, yeah.
Brilliant. Your film clips looks fantastic. So looking forward to seeing your film when it's ready.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Sant to talk next?
Yeah, so basically, I'm following my kind of film career also. I'm finishing a short film based on collective voices and music making. So basically, queer musicians. So that's a documentary that I'm finishing that will be around hopefully the world, if not soon. And yeah, there's this Southeast Asian film program that I curate, as I said. And we will see also how we expand on things. Currently, I research a lot about archive materials on migration and Cold War period. So let's see what comes out of that. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Sant. And Kate Hong.
I think I have two areas that I'm interested in researching the content. I'm very interested in the relationship between queer and direct blood kin, like the kinship, queer kinship. A lot of the film was talking about the exclusive community of queer people, and then there is not much films about our parents or how our family feel about us. So I would like to actually look at this area of how queer people is actually being perceived by their direct intimate encounter. And then another area is like I'm very interested in looking at the diaspora of Hong Kong people. As you may know, there's a lot of Hong Kong people leaving home. And then I also want to see how the queer people, the queer diaspora around the world, which is originally from Hong Kong. I think technologically, I think I'm very interested in exploring the possibility of virtual reality, like 360-degree video, and how that kind of technology can recreate different type of cinematic experience to us.
Brilliant, great. So, Ragil.
Yeah, well, Croatia is holding our debut event in Hamburg because we feel like everything happens in Berlin. So like this is our vision to like decentralize the platform. And we are holding our first debut called Rise Queers performance night on the 27th of November. So that is happening. I'm so excited to be collaborating with so many incredible people. This is like a Hamburg-Berlin exchange program where we invite artists, performers from Berlin to perform in Hamburg, and also like to amplify the voices and the work of people of color, queer in Hamburg as well. So that is like my upcoming project. And my personal project is to finish my master thesis. I think it's about time. Slowly going back to academia, and I will focus on my thesis on queer migration and the arts, and like how migration inform, like this is like kind of like my memoir, but like not really, how people like myself from the global south, born in the global south, migrated to like places like Germany, and like how you use kind of like the global north language. Like I wasn't a person of color until I came here like 3 years ago. So like how that kind of migration informed my sexuality, how this kind of like journey informed our art as well, and like exploring all these languages that we didn't have like growing up. So that is like my project for my academic work. And also like I'm doing cinema queer in the mountains with the Erasmus Plus program with critical queer solidarity Berlin. Also CERN is one of the workshop facilitator. So that is happening in January in Austria, in the Austrian Alps. So we will have like 4 different queer organizations from Europe coming together to learn about basic filmmaking. And it is led by BIPOC queer filmmakers such as CERN, Elliot Blue, who was also like part of the film festival guest speaker. So yeah, so those are the 3 things that I'm working on right now.
Sounds great. So thank you very much. Purple, the final word is yours.
Okay, so I don't have many events like the coming weeks because I need to concentrate on film projects. I recently working on 2 short films and also developing my feature debut. But if any events going on, I usually put on my website. It's very easy to remember. It is popofan.net. So there are also my contacts on it, and you can also try to find me on social media. I'm a social media whore. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and also TikTok. And I'm looking forward to hear from any of you if you have any interesting on collaborating or feedback to me. And thanks Hongwei so much for Northern University and the festival to host us.
Yeah, oh, well, that's going to be my acknowledgement as well. So thank the Festival of Social Sciences at University Nottingham for supporting this event, and thank the event teams. And again, I mean, today's recording will be shared among participants by email. So along with the kind of email with the video link, I'm also going to share some resources that will be shared amongst our panelists. So thank all the panelists for sharing your experience, knowledge, and dreams. What a wonderful panel. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Have a nice day.